Hi everyone. This series of videos is going to walk you through page 10 in the new packet, which is about percent multipliers. This is actually a specific type of geometric sequence that we're going to see a lot in the next couple of chapters. So this important lesson is going to give us a much needed foundation so that as we continue to do problems with percentages throughout the rest of this chapter and the next one, you'll have some sense of what to do, especially if you feel like percentages are one of those things that you learned in middle school or maybe elementary school and didn't really retain a whole lot of information for it. The reality is that percentages come up all the time in real life mathematics, and some of the best examples that we can do, the ones that actually have something to do with real life, are percentage based. The beginning of this question number 1, is probably going to scare you a little bit if you feel like you're not good at percentages, but hopefully you can see the real life relevance. We have things like a restaurant bill, where you know that percentages are often presented as the way to tip a waiter or a waitress. We usually say things like tip 18%, tip 20%, so percents are important there. Things like a raise. When you get a raise at work, you usually get a percentage raise. They often don't say you're going to get 5,000 extra dollars. They say we'll raise your salary 1% or something like that. And even things like retail. Something going on sale for 25% off. We know we see those deals come through our email all the time. We see those deals advertised on TV all the time, or even in stores. When we go to stores, we often see things like 20% off, 30% off, 50% off. So percentages are pretty universal, and yet we need to understand them to get a better sense of what to do with them. So this first question in number 1 is just meant to give you some quick basics with regards to percents, especially if you feel like you just never got that in elementary or middle school. I'm going to give myself a little bit of scratch space here just for a couple of quick notes, but you don't have to write these notes down if you feel like you understand percents. These are just things you might want to consider. The first thing to note is that essentially, to do a percent problem, you're really just doing a multiplication. The word of actually means multiply or times. So of always means multiply. That is universal. Anytime you see a math problem with the word of, you can actually think of the word multiply instead. So when it says 20% of $50, that actually means 20% times $50. Now, the percentage thing is probably the only thing that you'll want to make sure that you think about. A percentage always needs to be multiplied as a decimal. Now, the reason for that is because we want to always multiply what we call like terms. 20% is a percentage number, but $50 is not a percentage. That's an actual number of dollars. And since we always want to multiply like things together, remember that idea of like terms, you always want to multiply things that are similar. 20% as a percentage needs to be converted to something that is a real number like 50. 50 is a real number of dollars and cents. So we need to use real numbers times other real numbers. To change a percentage to a decimal, simply take the number that represents your percentage, in this case 20, and assume that it has a decimal right after the 0. By definition, 20 is like 20.00, so you can always think of it that way. To convert this percentage, this 20, to a decimal, move the decimal 2 places to the left. That's always the rule for converting a percentage to a decimal, is to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So the new decimal is going to be 0.20. Now you'll notice I put an extra 0 at the beginning. You don't have to put that. You can just call it 0.20 is fine. That's up to you. But to do this, we're going to do 20%, which is 0.20, multiplied by 50. So we're going to take 0.20 times 50. And that, of course, is going to use a calculator. Almost all these percentage questions today are going to be calculator questions. So even a phone calculator is fine. There's nothing too complicated, but it's something that you'll definitely want to avoid doing in your head if you can. 0.20 times 50 is 10. So 20% of $50 must be $10. Now you don't have to write dollars, but that is technically what this means. 20% of $50 is $10. And some people think of that in lots of different ways. Some people realize that 20% is just like dividing something into 5 equal pieces. So if you divide 50 into 5 equal pieces, you'd get 5 pieces of $10 a piece. So if you learn percentages that way, hopefully that makes sense. But if you didn't learn percentages that way, you can use this multiplication style setup instead. Here's another example of how that multiplication setup would work. 36% of 180. So 36% we need to change to a decimal. Again, take the current percentage, 36, and assume it has a decimal at the very end of the number. Move that decimal 2 to the left, 1, 2 to the left, and that new number, 0.36, is your new value. That's what we call your converted value. Of means times, so 0.36 multiply or times 180. 180 is already fine because it's not a percentage number, so I didn't need to change it. 180 is already as it is. So 0.36, you can do point or you can do 0.36. It's up to you, but calculators respond to both. 0.36 multiply or times 180 is 64.8. 64.8. So hopefully that seems relatively straightforward because you can start to see how this is going to work out. Try letter C and make sure that you understand how to convert your percentage to a decimal and how to make sure that you do that multiplication. Once you finish letter C, in the next video, we'll talk about how to do it when there's a bit more of a context or a situation involved.